Okay, Matt with Low Spec Action Squad here. Now I've already tested this, and it does work. And what this is, let me go ahead and get up here where there's more light. It is a PCI Express 16 riser that plugs into a 1X slot. Now I'm not specifically going for 1X, but I have four. Oh, come on. Am I not going to get any light in there? There we go. I have four PCI Express slots on my motherboard, but three of them are not, well, none of them are 16X truly. One of them is 8X in a 16X slot, and the rest of them are 4X and 8X slots. But that's not the problem. The problem is I can't fit four graphics cards in there. So I have to put them up on these risers. And this is temporary. This was just for testing, but it does work. Windows was able to detect the graphics card. It functioned perfectly fine. This card is a really weak card, but again, it was just for testing, and it performed just fine. It wasn't even bottlenecked by the 1X slot. Let me get a more comfortable position here. I found some old reports by Tom's Hardware from 2009 where they had tested the throughput of PCI Express using an HD 5970, I think it was? No, 5870, that's what they used. And PCI Express 8X and 4X didn't really bottleneck the card much. I think 4X still had like 97% of the card's resources available, while going down to 1X brought the card down to about 75% of its full performance, so you lose about a quarter of your performance going down to 1X. Now, to be fair, that is for a 5870, which at the time was a beefy card. This is one generation newer. This is a 6000 series. It's actually a 6770. And because this is not a very powerful card, it isn't really bottlenecked by the 1X interface, at least not from what I could tell. That doesn't mean it's a good experience. It's still a 6770, but I am severely limited by my power supply. This computer was never designed for this. I never had this in mind when I was building it. So I can put four graphics cards in. Yeah, I can do that. But each graphics card will be limited to one 6-pin power connector, or one 6+2 or 8-pin power connector. So, yeah, that means that I have not a lot of things to choose from. Most of my collection, at least most of the good ones, require dual 6-pin or a 6 and an 8-pin. The 6870 there, that has a 6-pin plus an 8-pin, I believe, so I can't use that. My 5870, this is a 5870? 5850, that's what this is. This one uses two 6-pins, so that's out of the question. I'm limited to my 5770, a GTS 450, and of course this is DirectX 11 in mind. I have plenty of cards that use single 6-pins, but they're limited to DirectX 10 or worse. So what I think I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to order a couple of other cards in, probably more 5770s, because they're not bad cards, especially for the price. I can get those for about $15 a piece. But for the moment, I have my 6770. In one of the computers over there, there's a 660 non-TI. That one, I think I'm going to pop in here. Over there, oh, too zoomed in that Dell that you can't see very well, has a 1050 Ti that I might pop in here temporarily. Although I'm not really sure if I want to do that because I'm trying to keep the value of this computer as low as I can. That's my whole gimmick, is 4 gamers, 1 tower on a budget. And so far, I have kept it under $450. Now here's what I've got. I have 2 240 gigabyte SSDs. These are quite old. These are 840s? 850s. 850 EVOs. I got... Oh, they're 250s. I thought they were 240s. I got those for $10 a piece. I actually bought 10 of them for $100 because that is a hell of a deal. So I'm going to have 2 of these in RAID 0. Hopefully that will give me enough for 4 VMs. Running off of a hard drive is kind of not ideal, especially if they're running off the same hard drive. Even an SSD, 4 separate VMs you'll feel the slowdown in read-write performance. So hopefully 2 SSDs in RAID 0 should help. I'm going to have Windows 10 VMs. Each one's going to have, I think I'm going to allocate either 64 or 80 gigs to them. That should be enough to install a couple games, pass through the video cards, and that'll be nifty. One of the more unexpected problems with this computer is USB ports. This is a server motherboard, and it just doesn't have many. In fact, if we look at the back, come on, I don't know how well you can tell, but there are 2, and only 2 USB ports on this motherboard, and it only has 1 header, which I think it's hidden by my sound card over there. So only 2 of these front USB ports work as well. That gives me 4 USB ports. Now, that's not technically a problem if I could pass through 1 USB port per VM and then use a splitter, but that's really not ideal, so I think I'm going to go a different route. Now, I think what I'm going to do is either Steam in-home streaming or Windows Remote Desktop. So the VMs will be running on this machine, but I will be using any of these other computers to remote into this. So this will be doing all of the work. None of the game rendering will be done on the remote system. All of it will be on this one, but it will let me not have to worry about passing through USB ports or network controllers or anything else like that could potentially be a bottleneck or just make this build not work. So that's my thought on there. Right now I still have I don't remember what those were. They're quad-core, 8-thread CPUs, so 16 threads total. And up here, I have my new X5650s, that's 6 cores, 12 threads per CPU. That would allow me to allocate 4 threads per gaming machine without having to worry about the overall performance of the virtualization hypervisor underneath it. With 48 gigs of RAM, I could allocate 12 gigs per VM, but I'm going to allocate 8, again giving me some overhead for the hypervisor. Which, speaking of which, I'm not going to use Unraid like everybody else. Unraid has a couple of issues. Number 1, and this is going off Linus Tech Tips' old 2 gamers 1 CPU. I don't necessarily know if this is still a problem, but I think it is. You cannot have the same hardware per virtual machine. So if I had 4 identical 6770s, I couldn't do that. I could only use 1, and I'd have to mix and match. I think what I'm going to use is I wanted to use Proxmox, but the PCI Express pass-through for Proxmox is just a pain in the butt. It just doesn't work very well. It's hard to set up. You have to manually go in and check your what are they called? IOMMU groups, and it's hard. And most importantly, time-consuming, and time is not something I have a lot of. So I'm going to go with ESXi, which, VMware. They do have a free edition, so the only thing about the free edition is they limit how many virtual CPUs that you can allocate to each virtual machine to 8. I'm not going to be doing 8, I'm not even going to do 6, so I don't have to worry about that. None of the limitations of the free version really affect me, which is perfect. So, I also tried Zen Server. I don't like what they did with their free version. They pretty much completely gutted it. I checked out the community-made... Oh, what did they call it? It's basically Zen Server, but open source. That one had a lot of problems. I couldn't get it to work right. I tried Overt. That just didn't work. Again, Proxmox has its insane manual setup for PCI Express pass-through, whereas with VMware and ESXi, you don't have to worry about that. Now, I will be limited to ESXi 6.5 because 6.7 no longer has support for any of the 1366 Xeons. So, that's not too bad because they're only on 6.7. It's not that out of date. Plus, I've heard if you install 6.5 and then update to 6.7, it will still work, despite not being supported. Anyway, that might be something I try. This video has now passed 11 minutes, so I'm going to install these. I don't have all of the pass-throughs here. I only have 3 of them, so I won't be able to finish this project this weekend. So that is that. Also, I don't even think I'm going to use these for the final build because I have 4x to 16x adapters coming in instead of these 1x to 16x. That'll give me more PCI Express lanes, more bandwidth for whatever graphics cards I do end up using, because I certainly hope I can get something better than, some 6770s in there, but I guess we'll have to see. Anyway, as of this recording, OzTalks Hardware has not released his next video on this, so it is possible that he is still working with Unraid and trying to get things figured out on this. But I don't know. I'm not a psychic. So, again, he had a budget of $1,500, and I've kept this under $450 so far. I got these for 99 cents from China, which is an amazing deal, by the way. Literally the whole thing, cable and whatever that is included. I picked this up for $5 on the local Craigslist ad because it didn't have the shroud. I think that's a sapphire? Yeah, it's a sapphire. The SSD here, this is coming out of the build because this has my Windows installation and I honestly don't want to mess with that. So that's another $45 taken off the total price. My 580 is out of here. That's another $30 taken off the price. So if we want to get real technical, I've kept this build under $400 so far. $20 for the new SSDs, a couple bucks for the risers, $5 for the card. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have for the moment. I'm going to pop these SSDs in, get ESXi installed, get a couple of VMs up and running, and after that I should be off to the races. One more thing, actually. So I'm going to take that sound card out. I needed that because this is a server motherboard and it does not have onboard sound. And originally this was just going to be a Windows 10 PC. That's why Windows 10 is on that SSD. So I'm going to remove that sound card, and those 2 PCI slots will be occupied by dual port Ethernet cards. So I can assign 1 dedicated Ethernet port per virtual machine, which I can then, get out of here, plug into my switch, which should help decrease or limit the effects of any network latency for the connecting to my VMs. Because the last thing that I want is input lag. And when you're hosting a virtual machine and connecting to it from an outside source, you are going to have input lag. So the more I can decrease that, the better. Anyway, this is nearly 15 minutes now, so I'm going to go ahead and get out of here and let you guys watch much better videos elsewhere. No, I don't know if you guys heard that. My roommate is playing something and he's losing. Anyway, this has been Matt from Low Spec Action Squad. I am signing out. Bye-bye.